Have you ever been looked at like you were invisible? Like you were nothing more than the gum on the bottom of a rich man's shoe? That's exactly how Harrison Callaway, New York's most ruthless real estate tycoon, treated Adella. He laughed in her face, mocked her intelligence and screamed, "She can't even read the menu," in a silent, 5-star restaurant. But he made one fatal calculation error. He didn't know that the girl pouring his water wasn't just a waitress. She was holding a secret that would cost him millions. Watch until the end to see the moment the billionaire realized he was the one who didn't understand a word. The rain was hammering against the blackened windows of Le Petit Palais on East 61st Street. Inside, however, the world was golden, warm, and smelled faintly of truffle oil and old money. For Adella Bennett, tonight was just another Tuesday, which meant her feet were already throbbing inside her cheap black non-slip shoes. At 26, Adella had mastered the art of being invisible. In the high-stakes world of Manhattan, fine dining, invisibility was a survival mechanism. You didn't want to be noticed. If you were noticed, it was usually because you had dropped a fork, poured the wine a millimeter too high, or, God forbid, made eye contact with a client who didn't want to be seen with his mistress. "Adella, table 4 needs a crumb sweep. Now." The sharp whisper came from Henri, the floor manager. Henri was a man who sweated anxiety. He treated Le Petit Palais not like a restaurant, but like a nuclear silo where one wrong move would detonate the Upper East Side. "On it, Henri," Adella said, keeping her head down. She grabbed her silver crummer and moved silently across the plush carpet. To the patrons, Adella was just a uniform, a white button-down shirt, a black apron, hair pulled back into a severe bun. They didn't see the dark circles under her eyes from pulling double shifts. They certainly didn't know that just 3 years ago, Adella wasn't wiping crumbs off tablecloths. She was sitting in a lecture hall at the Sorbonne in Paris, finishing her dissertation on 17th century French dialectics. They didn't know she was fluent in 4 languages. They didn't know she had returned to the States, not because she failed, but because her father's sudden diagnosis of early-onset Alzheimer's had drained the family savings in 6 months, forcing her to trade academia for tips. She reached table 4. It was occupied by the CEO of a major logistics firm and his wife. Adella moved with the precision of a surgeon, scraping the white linen clean without interrupting their conversation about a ski trip to Aspen. "Water," the wife said, not looking up, tapping her crystal goblet. "Of course, madam," Adella replied softly. As she moved to the service station to refill the pitcher, the heavy oak doors at the front of the restaurant swung open. A gust of cold wind momentarily disrupted the warm air, causing the candle flames on the tables to dance. The room didn't go silent, but the energy shifted. It was a gravitational pull. Heads turned. Whispers started. Henri, the manager, practically sprinted to the host stand, his face draining of color. Walking through the door was a man who looked like he owned the oxygen in the room. He was tall, wearing a bespoke navy suit that probably cost more than Adella's entire college tuition. He had silver fox hair, cold blue eyes, and a jawline that looked like it was carved from granite. It was Harrison Callaway. Everyone in New York knew Harrison Callaway. He was the billionaire developer behind the new Skyline Spire project in Hudson Yards. He was known for 2 things: his ruthless hostile takeovers and his absolute intolerance for incompetence. He had once fired his personal assistant in the middle of a press conference for handing him a pen with blue ink instead of black. And on his arm was a woman who looked terrifyingly bored. She was young, likely a model, scrolling through her phone before they had even been seated. Adella felt a pit form in her stomach. Callaway was legendary for terrorizing service staff. The servers called him The butcher of 61st Street. Henry was bowing so low he was almost horizontal. Mr. Callaway, we weren't expecting you this evening. We don't have your usual table 1 reserved, but I don't care about the table, Henry. Callaway's voice was a low, smooth baritone that carried across the room. Just put us somewhere where I don't have to look at the kitchen. Right away, sir. Right away. Henry scanned the room, panic in his eyes. The restaurant was fully booked. The only open table was table 9, Adella's table. Henry locked eyes with Adella across the room. He gave her a look that said, "Do not mess this up, or you are dead." Adella took a deep breath, clutching the water pitcher tighter. She adjusted her apron. She told herself it was just dinner, just plates and forks. She was wrong. Harrison Callaway sat at table 9 as if it were a throne he was disappointed in. He didn't look at the menu. He didn't look at the ambiance. He immediately pulled out 2 phones and placed them on the table, face up. "Sparkling," he barked before Adella had even reached the table. "Good evening, sir." "Ma'am." Adella placed the heavy crystal glasses down. "Pellegrino or Perrier?" Callaway looked up, his eyes narrowing, as if she had asked him a math problem he found beneath him. "I said sparkling. If I wanted a brand debate, I'd go to a marketing meeting. Bring me the house vintage sparkling water and make sure it's chilled to exactly 40 degrees. If there is ice in the glass, I send it back." "Understood, sir," Adella said, keeping her voice even. "And the wine list," he snapped. "The reserve list, not the paper one you give the tourists." "Of course." Adella retreated to the back. Henri was pacing in the kitchen, wiping sweat from his forehead. "He's in a mood," Henri hissed. "He just lost the bid for the Midtown Library renovation. He's looking for a fight, Adella. Do not give him one. Whatever he says, you agree. If he says the sky is green, you ask him what shade of emerald he prefers." "I got it, Henry," Adella said, grabbing the leather-bound reserve wine list, a book that contained bottles worth up to $15,000. She returned to the table. Callaway was ignoring his date, who was taking a selfie with her bread plate. Adella presented the book with 2 hands. "The reserve list, sir." Callaway didn't take it. He waved his hand dismissively. "I don't want to read. I want a recommendation. Impress me." This was a trap. Adella knew it. Every server knew the impress me trap. If you suggested something too cheap, you insulted his wealth. If you suggested the most expensive bottle, you were trying to rip him off. You had to find the middle ground, the connoisseur's choice. Adella recalled her training. "We have a spectacular 2005 Chateau Margaux, sir. It's full-bodied with notes of—" "Boring," Callaway interrupted, cutting her off. He picked up a breadstick and snapped it in half aggressively. "Everyone drinks Margaux. It's pedestrian. Try again." Adella swallowed. "Perhaps the Domaine de la Romane Conti. We have a 2009 that has been breathing for—" "Too woody." He dismissed her again, not even looking at her. He looked at his date. "Can you believe this? They hire people off the street who think memorizing 3 names makes them a sommelier." The date giggled. "Totally, babe." Adella felt the heat rising in her neck. She took a breath. "Sir, if you enjoy a more complex profile, might I suggest the 1990 Hermitage La Chapelle? It has a very distinct Syrah structure, with a finish that is—" Callaway slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. The restaurant went quiet. "I don't want a lecture." Callaway raised his voice. "I want a decent bottle of wine. Why is it so hard to get good help in this city?" He snatched the wine list from her hands, nearly clipping her fingers with the heavy leather cover. He flipped it open aggressively, scanning the pages. "God, look at this," he muttered loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "This menu is a disaster. Who organizes a list by region instead of vintage for Bordeaux? Idiots! He pointed a thick finger at a line on the page. This. Bring me this. Adella looked at where he was pointing. It was a Chateau Haut-Brion. But there was a problem. The menu description was written entirely in French, as was the tradition for the reserve list at Le Petit Palais. The Haut-Brion, sir? Adella clarified. Yes, the Haut-Brion. He mocked her tone. And bring the decanter. I assume you know what a decanter is? It's the glass thing you pour liquid into. Try not to drop it. Right away. Adella turned to leave, her heart pounding against her ribs. She wasn't angry yet. She was just trying to survive. She went to the cellar, retrieved the dusty bottle, and brought it to the decanting station near table 9. This was the most critical part of the service. Decanting a vintage wine in front of a guest was a performance. She lit the candle. She uncorked the bottle without a sound. She began to pour the dark red liquid slowly, using the candle's light to watch for sediment in the neck of the bottle. Her hand was steady. Her focus was absolute. "Stop!" Callaway shouted. Adella froze, the bottle mid-pour. "Sir, you're pouring it too fast. You're bruising the wine." Callaway stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. "Jesus Christ, do you have any idea what that bottle costs? That is a $4,000 bottle of wine, and you're pouring it like it's Gatorade. Sir, I assure you, the flow rate is standard for a sediment separation. Don't you dare talk back to me." Callaway stepped out of the booth, towering over her. "You are incompetent. You are clumsy. And quite frankly, you are ruining my evening." He looked around the restaurant, inviting the audience to join his outrage. "Where is Henry?" "Henry!" Callaway bellowed. Henry appeared instantly, looking like he was about to faint. "Mr. Callaway, please, what is the matter?" "The matter?" Callaway sneered, pointing a finger directly in Adella's face, "is that this girl is an embarrassment. She doesn't know the wines. She has no grace. And frankly—" He picked up the menu from the table and shoved it toward Adella's chest. "I bet she doesn't even know what she's serving. Look at her. She's a local hire, probably dropped out of community college." Callaway laughed, a cruel, cold sound. "She can't even read the menu. It's in French, Henry. Real French. Not whatever garbage language she speaks." The room was dead silent. The insult hung in the air like toxic smoke. Adella stood there, clutching the $4,000 bottle of wine. She looked at Henry, who was looking at the floor, unable to defend her. She looked at Callaway, who was grinning, feeling powerful, feeling big. And then something in Adella snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a lock opening. The fear evaporated. The anxiety about her tips, her rent, her father's medical bills, it all vanished, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. She slowly set the bottle down on the decanting table. She picked up the menu Callaway had thrown at her. She looked him dead in the eye. "Actually, Mr. Callaway," she said, her voice dropping an octave, losing the subservient customer service pitch and finding her natural, commanding tone. "The issue isn't that I can't read the menu." The silence in Le Petit Palais deepened. It wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. Even the kitchen staff had stopped moving, peering through the porthole windows of the swinging doors. Harrison Callaway blinked. He hadn't expected her to speak. He expected tears. He expected an apology. He didn't expect the sudden steel in her spine. "Excuse me?" Callaway stepped closer, invading her personal space. "What did you just say to me?" "I said," Adella repeated, her voice steady and projecting clearly. "The problem isn't my reading comprehension. The problem, Mr. Callaway, is that you ordered the wrong wine." Callaway's face turned a shade of violet. "I ordered the Haut-Brion. I pointed right at it." "You pointed at the text, yes," Adella said, opening the leather book calmly. But you didn't read the description? Or perhaps you couldn't. I know what I ordered, he roared. It's a 1989 Bordeaux, the Premier Grand Cru Classé. Adella smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a professor watching a student fail an exam they didn't study for. No, sir, she said softly. The 1989 is listed on the page before this one. What you pointed to, and what I brought you, as per your explicit instruction, is the Bahorn's Haut-Brion. She paused for effect. It is the second label of the estate. A fine wine, certainly, but significantly less complex, and about 1/10 of the price. If you had read the French description properly, you would have seen the note, Second vin du château, pour consommation précoce. Callaway froze. He looked at the bottle. He looked at the menu. That's a lie, he stammered, his confidence faltering for a microsecond. It's French. It's all just fancy words. It's not just fancy words, Mr. Callaway. It is a language, Adella said. Then she did it. She switched. Monsieur, si vous aviez pris la peine de lire correctement le millésime et l'appellation, vous auriez su que vous commandiez un vin de table glorifié, et non le chef-d'œuvre que vous pensiez étaler devant votre invité pour l'impressionner. Translation. Sir, if you had taken the trouble to correctly read the vintage and the appellation, you would have known that you were ordering a glorified table wine and not the masterpiece you thought you were flaunting to impress your guest. Her French was flawless. It wasn't high school French. It was Parisian. The accent was crisp, the grammar impeccable, the cadence lyrical yet biting. Callaway's jaw actually dropped. His date looked up from her phone, eyes wide. Adella wasn't done. She stepped around the decanting carte, moving toward the table with the grace of a diplomate. De plus, she continued, gesturing to the menu. Votre prononciation du mot terroir est épouvantable. Vous le prononcez comme si c'était le nom d'un chien de chasse. C'est terroir. Le R est guttural, monsieur. Il vient de la gorge, pas du nez. Translation. Furthermore, your pronunciation of the word terroir is appalling. You pronounce it as if it were the name of a hunting dog. It is terroir. The R is guttural, sir. It comes from the throat, not the nose. She closed the menu with a soft thud and placed it gently on the table in front of him. So, she switched back to English, her voice cool and professional. Would you like me to pour the second-rate wine you ordered? Or would you like to apologize to me and let me fetch the bottle you actually wanted, which I tried to suggest 5 minutes ago? The room was paralyzed. A woman at table 6 gasped. Callaway stood there, stripping of his armor. He was a billionaire, a titan of industry, but in the arena of culture and intellect, he had just been TKO'd by a waitress in an apron. His face cycled through 3 emotions: shock, humiliation, and then pure, unadulterated rage. He didn't apologize. Men like Harrison Callaway never apologize. They double down. You insolent little... Callaway hissed, his voice shaking. Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea who I am? I know exactly who you are, Adella said. You're the man making a scene in a quiet restaurant. Henry! Callaway screamed, turning to the manager. Fire her! Fire her right now! If she is not out of this building in 30 seconds, I will buy this building and evict every single one of you. Do you hear me? I will bury this business. Henri was trembling. He looked at Adella, tears in his eyes. He liked Adella. She was his best worker, but he had a family, he had a mortgage, and Callaway was a monster who could ruin them all. Adella, Henri whispered, his voice breaking. Please, just go to the back. No, Henry, Callaway shouted. Not the back. The street! I want her fired. Gone! Now! Adella looked at Henry. She saw the fear. She didn't want to destroy Henry's life. It's okay, Henry, Adella said softly. She untied her apron. I'm leaving. She dropped the black apron on the table, right next to the $400 bottle of wine Callaway had mistaken for a $4,000 one. Enjoy your dinner, Mr. Callaway, she said. Try not to bruise the water. She turned on her heel and walked toward the exit. She held her head high, but inside she was crumbling. She had just lost her job. She had just lost the income she needed for her dad's medication. It was a moral victory, but moral victories didn't pay the nursing home bills. As she reached the heavy wooden doors, Callaway shouted after her, That's right, run away. Go back to whatever gutter you crawled out of. You're nothing. You hear me? Nothing. Adella pushed through the doors into the cold rain. But the story wasn't over. Because sitting at table 1, the table Callaway had wanted but couldn't get, was an elderly man with a white beard and a cane. He had watched the entire exchange. He hadn't said a word. But as the door closed behind Adella, the old man slowly pulled a phone from his tweed jacket pocket. He dialed a number. It's Pierre, the old man said into the phone. I've found her. The rain in New York City doesn't wash things clean. It just makes the grime slicker. Adella stood under the awning of a closed bodega, 2 blocks from Le Petit Palais, shivering. Her phone was buzzing in her pocket, likely Henri texting her an apology, or her landlord asking about the rent check that was due in 3 days. She didn't check it. She just stared at a puddle reflecting the neon sign of a 24-hour pharmacy. She had done the right thing. She knew that. She had stood up for herself. But moral victories were a cold comfort when you were unemployed in one of the most expensive cities on earth. The adrenaline from the confrontation was fading, replaced by a crushing nausea. What have I done? She thought. I just nuked my only source of income. Dad's care facility costs $6,000 a month. I have $400 in the bank. A pair of headlights cut through the gloom, slowing down as they approached the curb. It wasn't a taxi. It was a vintage Rolls-Royce Phantom, 2-tone silver and black, looking like a land yacht navigating the puddles. The car stopped directly in front of her. The back window hummed down. Mademoiselle Bennet, a voice croaked from the dark interior. Adella squinted. It was the old man from table 1, the one with the white beard. I don't have any money, Adella said instinctively, hugging her arms for warmth. If you're looking for a good time, you have the wrong girl. The old man chuckled, a dry, papery sound. I am 82 years old, my dear. The only good time I am looking for is a nap. Get in the car. I'm not getting in a car with a stranger. My name is Pierre Dubois, the man said. And I believe we share a mutual enemy. Besides, you are shivering, and my driver has the seat warmers on. Adella hesitated. She looked at the desolate street. She looked at the warm, leather-clad interior of the Rolls. The name Dubois rang a bell. It was a common French surname, but spoken with that specific aristocratic lilt. It sounded familiar from her studies at the Sorbonne. One ride, Adella said. To the subway station. That's it. Agreed. She opened the heavy door and slid inside. The air smelled of cedarwood and expensive tobacco. Pierre sat on the other side, leaning on a cane with a silver handle shaped like a lion's head. Jean-Luc, Pierre said to the driver. Just drive around the park. Yes, monsieur. The car glided forward, the suspension so smooth the potholes of New York ceased to exist. You handled Harrison Callaway with remarkable poise, Pierre said, not looking at her, staring out the window at the rain-streaked city. Most people just let him scream. He enjoys the screaming. He's a bully, Adella muttered, wiping rain from her face. I don't like bullies. No, Pierre agreed. Neither do I. But he is a powerful bully. And now he is a vengeful one. He will blacklist you, Adella. You know this. You won't wait tables in this zip code again. Adella felt a lump form in her throat. I know. I'll figure something out. I always do. You are wasting your time, Pierre said sharply. Adella turned to him, offended. Excuse me? You are wasting your time, he repeated, turning his steel-grey eyes on her. I heard your accent. It is not just fluent. It is educated. Sorbonne? Sciences Po. Sorbonne, Adella said softly. Literature and linguistics. And yet you are pouring water for men who cannot distinguish between a Bordeaux and a box of juice. Pierre sighed. I have a proposition for you, Adella Bennett. I'm listening. Pierre tapped his cane on the floor mat. Harrison Callaway is not just a rude diner. He is currently in negotiations to purchase a very specific piece of land from my family's estate in the Loire Valley. He claims he wants to preserve the history. He claims he wants to build a cultural retreat. Pierre scoffed. I know he is lying. I know he plans to bulldoze the vineyard to build a golf course and a 400-room hotel. But my board of directors, they are greedy. They see the money Callaway is offering, and they want me to sign. They think I am just a sentimental old man who is standing in the way of progress. What does this have to do with me? Adella asked. Callaway thinks I am senile. Pierre smiled, revealing a set of perfect, albeit aged, teeth. He thinks I don't understand English very well. He thinks he can smile to my face and whisper to his lawyers in English about how they are going to screw me over. He comes to my estate in upstate New York on Friday to sign the final contracts. Pierre reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. I need a translator, Pierre said. But not a professional translator from an agency. Callaway knows them all. I need someone he has already dismissed. Someone he thinks is beneath him. Someone he believes is nothing. He clicked a gold pen and began to write. I need you to come to the meeting. I need you to listen to everything he says to his team when he thinks I am not listening. I need you to read the fine print in the French contracts that his lawyers have drafted, looking for the loopholes they inevitably hid. He tore the check out and held it out to her. Adella looked at the numbers. Her breath hitched. It was for $50,000. This is an advance, Pierre said casually. Consider it a consulting fee. If we succeed in exposing his fraud and saving my vineyard, I will triple it. Adella stared at the check. That was her father's care for almost a year. That was her rent. That was freedom. Why trust me? Adella asked, her voice trembling. I'm just a waitress. Pierre looked at her with intense gravity. Because I saw the way you looked at him tonight. You don't want his money, Adella. You want his blood. And frankly, so do I. Adella took the check. Her fingers brushed against the cool paper. She thought of Callaway's smug face. She thought of the way he had thrown the menu at her. What time is the meeting? Adella asked. Pierre smiled. Friday, noon. Wear something sharp. We are going to war. Friday arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. Pierre's estate in the Hudson Valley was less of a house and more of a fortress made of stone and ivy, overlooking the Hudson River. Inside the mahogany-paneled library, a fire was crackling, but it did little to warm the temperature in the room. On one side of the massive oak table sat Harrison Callaway and his entourage. 3 lawyers in identical grey suits, a younger real estate analyst who looked terrified, and his personal fixer, a man named Julian who had dead eyes. On the other side sat Pierre Dubois, looking frail in a cardigan, sipping tea with a shaking hand. And standing slightly behind Pierre near the bookshelf was Adella. She had spent $800 of the advance on a suit. It was a navy blue power suit, tailored to within an inch of its life. Her hair was no longer in a messy server's bun. It was blown out straight, sharp enough to cut glass. She wore thick-rimmed glasses that Pierre had suggested, part disguise, part intellectual armor. When Callaway had entered the room 10 minutes ago, he hadn't even looked at her. To him, she was just another assistant, another piece of furniture. The invisibility that had been her curse was now her weapon. "Let's get this over with, Pierre," Callaway said, checking his heavy gold watch. "I have a helicopter waiting. The board approved the price. We're just signing the deeds today." "Patience, Mr. Callaway," Pierre said. His voice feigned to sound weak and reedy. "These documents, they are very long, and my eyes, they are not what they used to be. That's why we sent over the English translations yesterday," Callaway said, flashing a shark-like grin. "Everything is standard. We're giving you $40 million for the chateau and the surrounding 40 acres. You get to keep the family cemetery plot, as requested. It's a generous deal." Callaway turned to his lead lawyer, a man named Sterling, and muttered in rapid-fire English, low and fast. "Make sure he signs the Clause 14 addendum first. If he signs the main deed before the environmental waiver, we're screwed on the wetlands drainage." Adella, standing silently by the bookshelf, didn't flinch, but her ears pricked up. Wetlands drainage. Pierre looked at Adella. "Mademoiselle Bennet, could you please help me review the French version of the deed? Just to ensure the, how do you say, translation is faithful?" Callaway rolled his eyes. "Jesus, Pierre, who is this? Your nurse?" Adella stepped forward. She walked to the table with a slow, predatory cadence. She placed a stack of files down. "I am Monsieur Dubois' external consultant for linguistic compliance," Adella said. Her voice was different today. Deeper, flatter, devoid of the emotional crackle she had in the restaurant. Callaway frowned. He tilted his head, looking at her. Recognition flickered in his eyes, but he couldn't quite place it. The glasses threw him off. The suit threw him off. And mostly, his own arrogance threw him off. He couldn't conceive that the woman he humiliated on Tuesday would be in a billionaire's private library on Friday. "Linguistic compliance," Callaway scoffed. "That's a made-up job title. Look, honey, just read the bold parts and show him where to sign." Adella ignored him. She picked up the thick document bound in blue, the French contract Callaway's team had prepared. She flipped through the pages. The room was silent, except for the turning of paper and the crackle of the fire. "Mr. Callaway," Adella said, stopping on page 42. "I'm confused about Article 14, subsection B." Sterling, the lawyer, stiffened. "It's a standard liability clause." "Is it?" Adella asked. She switched to French, reading aloud from the document. "L'acheteur se réserve le droit de modifier la topographie des zones humides pour des raisons de sécurité structurelle, sans consultation préalable." She looked up over the rim of her glasses. "For those of you who don't speak the language of the contract you wrote," Adella said, staring directly at Callaway, "that says the buyer reserves the right to modify the wetlands for structural safety without prior consultation." "So?" Callaway shrugged. "We need to make sure the foundation is safe." "But," Adella continued, "if I cross-reference this with the English summary you sent over." She picked up the other document. The English summary says, "Buyer agrees to preserve all natural landscapes in accordance with local heritage laws." She dropped the papers on the table. Thud. "These two documents contradict each other, Mr. Callaway. One promises preservation. The other grants you legal immunity to drain the lake and the vineyard's irrigation source to build. Well, whatever you plan to build, that requires that much concrete. Callaway's face went red. He turned to Sterling. I thought you said the translation was loose enough to pass. He shouted it. In the quiet room, it was a gunshot. Sterling looked horrified. Sir, keep your voice down. Callaway looked back at Adella. He stood up, leaning over the table. He studied her face, the structure of her cheekbones, the eyes. Wait a minute, Callaway whispered. He squinted. The water, he muttered. The wine. His eyes went wide. You, he breathed. You're the waitress. You're the incompetent waitress from Le Petit Palais. Callaway let out a bark of incredulous laughter. He turned to Pierre, pointing an accusing finger at Adella. Pierre, are you insane? This isn't a consultant. This is a server. She waited on me 3 days ago. She was fired for incompetence. This is a joke, right? You brought a waitress to negotiate a $40 million deal? Pierre didn't look frail anymore. He slowly set his teacup down. He sat up straighter, the years seeming to melt off his shoulders. Mr. Callaway, Pierre said, his voice crisp and authoritative. I did not bring a waitress. Pierre gestured to Adella. I brought the only person in New York who was brave enough to tell you that you have no idea what you are reading. Callaway slammed his hand on the table. I'm not doing this. I'm not negotiating with the help. Get her out of here, or the deal is off. Adella didn't move. She didn't retreat. She remembered the rain. She remembered the fear of not being able to pay for her dad. The deal isn't off, Mr. Callaway, Adella said, locking eyes with him. Because if you walk out that door, I send the recording of this meeting, specifically the part where you just admitted to your lawyer that you intended to defraud Mr. Dubois regarding the environmental waivers, to the French authorities. Callaway froze. What recording? Adella pulled her phone from her suit pocket. The screen was black, but the red light at the top was pulsing. New York is a one-party consent state for audio recording, Adella said, citing the law she had looked up the night before. And since I am an active participant in this meeting, well, you can fill in the blanks. The room went dead silent. The lawyer, Sterling, closed his laptop. He knew when a ship was sinking. Callaway looked at the phone. He looked at Adella. For the first time in his life, he didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a man who had walked into a trap. You wouldn't dare, Callaway whispered. Try me, Adella said. Or, as you might say in French, essayez-moi. Harrison Callaway looked like he had been struck by lightning. He stood up so fast his chair toppled backward onto the stone terrace with a loud clatter. You set me up, Callaway hissed, pointing a trembling finger at Pierre. You brought this servant here to entrap me. I brought a consultant, Pierre said, calmly sipping his iced tea. You were the one who decided to commit a felony in front of her. Callaway lunged for Adella's phone. Give me that. But before he could reach her, 2 large men in dark suits stepped out from the shadows of the patio doors. They were Pierre's private security. They didn't look like they wanted to negotiate. Callaway skidded to a halt, his chest heaving. You can't use that recording, Callaway spat, trying to regain his composure. It's inadmissible. I have the best lawyers in the city. Adella stepped forward, holding the phone tight. Actually, Mr. Callaway, blackmail and fraud aren't protected by attorney-client privilege. And even if you manage to keep this out of criminal court, imagine what it will do to your stock price on Monday morning. She took a step closer to the billionaire who had made her feel so small just days ago. Imagine the headlines, she continued. Billionaire developer admits to faking environmental reports. Your investors will pull out. The city will launch an investigation into every building you've constructed in the last decade. The Skyline Spire project. It won't just be dead. It will be a crime scene. Callaway looked at his own lawyers for help. They were looking at their shoes, distancing themselves from the blast radius. Julian, the fixer, was already closing his briefcase, looking for an exit. "What do you want?" Callaway growled, his voice a low rumble of defeat. Adella looked at Pierre. The old man gave her a subtle nod. "Finish him." "First," Adella said, "you are going to sign the original contract with Monsieur Dubois, the one with the full environmental protections and the full price. No discounts, no loopholes." "Done," Callaway said quickly. "Give me the pen." "Second," Adella continued, her voice rising, "you are going to write a personal check to the Whispering Pines Care Facility in the amount of $200,000. That should cover the community donation fund for the next year." Callaway blinked. "A nursing home. Fine. Whatever." "And finally," Adella said. She picked up the glass of water from the table. The ice clinked softly. "You are going to go back to Le Petit Palais. You are going to find Henri. You are going to apologize to him for threatening his livelihood. And you are going to leave a tip. A big one." Callaway's jaw clenched. The money didn't bother him. The apology? That was acid in his throat. But he looked at Adella's phone. He looked at the security guards. He realized he was in a trap of his own making. "Fine," he whispered. He signed the papers with aggressive, jagged strokes. He wrote the check. He stormed out of the house without saying goodbye, his entourage scrambling to keep up. As his SUV peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying everywhere, Adella felt her knees go weak. She sat down heavily in the chair Callaway had vacated. Pierre smiled. "You were magnificent, my dear. Absolutely magnificent." "I think I'm going to throw up." Adella laughed nervously, her hands shaking. "Do not," Pierre chuckled. "We have champagne to drink, real champagne, not the swill he ordered." 2 weeks later, the sky over Manhattan finally cleared. The relentless grey rain that had battered the city during Adella's lowest moments had lifted, replaced by a crisp, twilight violet that settled over the Upper East Side. The air was cool, smelling of roasted chestnuts from street vendors and the exhaust of luxury sedans. But to Adella Bennett, it smelled entirely new. It smelled like oxygen. She stood on the sidewalk outside Le Petit Palais. Just 14 days ago, she had stood in this exact spot, shivering in a thin cardigan, clutching a final paycheck that wouldn't cover her rent, feeling the crushing weight of invisibility. She had been the girl with the water pitcher. She had been Hey You. She had been the gum on Harrison Callaway's shoe. Tonight, she was wearing a slate-grey structured suit from a boutique in Soho, chosen specifically by Pierre. Her hair was down, cascading over her shoulders in soft waves, no longer pulled back into the severe, headache-inducing bun required by the restaurant's grooming standards. She reached for the heavy brass handle of the front door. For 3 years, she had entered through the service alley in the back, past the overflowing dumpsters and the smoking cooks. Tonight, she pulled the main door open. The warmth hit her first, that familiar scent of beeswax candles, reduction sauces, and expensive perfume. The sound was a low hum of clinking silverware and hushed, wealthy laughter. Henri was at the host stand, his head buried in the reservation book. He looked thinner, more frazzled than usual. He was frantically erasing something with a pencil. "Good evening," Adella said, her voice calm and melodic. "I believe I have a reservation." Henri didn't look up immediately. "One moment, madame. We are quite fully booked this evening, but if you have a—" He looked up. The pencil dropped from his hand and rolled across the mahogany podium. "Adella?" Henry breathed. He blinked rapidly, as if trying to reconcile the image of the exhausted employee he knew with the radiant woman standing before him. He scanned her suit, her shoes, and finally, the calm, confident smile on her face. "Mon Dieu," Henri whispered, breaking all professional protocol. He rushed around the stand. For a second, Adella thought he might bow, but instead, he grabbed her hands. His palms were damp. We didn't know if you would come back. After the incident." "I had to come back, Henri," Adella said gently. "I never picked up my last tips." Henri let out a jagged, hysterical laugh. "Tips? Forget the tips. Adella, the kitchen is still talking about it. The sous-chef calls you the Dragon Slayer. You are a legend back there." He lowered his voice, leaning in conspiratorially, his eyes darting around the room. "He hasn't been back, you know. Callaway." "I assumed not," Adella said. "It is worse than that," Henri whispered, savouring the gossip like a fine cognac. "His reserved table? The one he demanded every Tuesday? We gave it away last week to a tourist family from Nebraska. They ordered burgers and milkshakes. It was—" Henry kissed his fingertips. "Poetic justice. The staff says he is selling his penthouse. The papers say he is under investigation for fraud in 3 different countries. You didn't just spill his wine, Adella. You tipped over his whole life." Adella felt a strange sensation in her chest. It wasn't gloating. It wasn't joy at another man's suffering. It was simply the heavy, solid feeling of balance being restored. "I didn't do it alone, Henri," she said. Right, Henri nodded, straightening his tie and returning to his maître de persona. "Your guest is waiting. Table 1, the best seat in the house." Henri picked up 2 menus, then paused. He looked at Adella with a sheepish grin. "Although, I suppose you don't need a menu to know what is good, do you? Lead the way, Henri." Walking through the dining room felt like an out-of-body experience. Adella knew every inch of this floor. She knew which floorboard creaked near table 6. She knew that the air conditioning vent above table 4 created a draft that annoyed women in sleeveless dresses. She saw the servers, her former colleagues, moving in their synchronized dance. They saw her, heads turned, trays wobbled slightly, eyes widened in recognition. Adella gave a small, subtle nod to Marco, the busboy who used to sneak her extra bread rolls when she was broke. Marco looked like he had seen a ghost, his mouth hanging open. She reached table 1, the semi-private alcove with the velvet banquette and the view of the entire room. Pierre Dubois was waiting. He rose as she approached, leaning heavily on his cane, his white beard perfectly groomed. "Mademoiselle Bennet," Pierre said, his voice warm and gravelly. "You look formidable." "Monsieur Dubois," Adella replied, taking his hand. "You look expensive." Pierre chuckled and sat down, signalling for the sommelier. "I try my best." The sommelier approached, a man named Jean-Paul, who had once scolded Adella for holding a glass by the bowl instead of the stem. He looked terrified. He presented the wine list to Pierre, but Pierre waved a hand toward Adella. "The lady will choose," Pierre said. "And be careful, Jean-Paul. She knows more about the cellar than you do." Jean-Paul swallowed hard and handed the heavy leather book to Adella. His hands were shaking. Adella took the book. She didn't open it. "We'll have the 1990 Hermitage La Chapelle," she said, locking eyes with the sommelier. "And please, decant it properly. Watch the sediment. I'd hate for it to be bruised." Jean-Paul turned a shade of crimson. "Immediately, madame. An excellent choice." As the sommelier retreated, Adella turned to Pierre. The table between them was covered in white linen, a vast distance from the service station, where she used to hide to eat her dinner standing up. "It is done?" Adella asked quietly. Pierre reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. He slid it across the table. "The deed to the vineyard is secure," Pierre said. "Callaway's lawyers withdrew their claims yesterday morning. They were very eager to avoid the release of certain audio recordings regarding the wetlands." Pierre paused, his expression turning serious. "But more importantly, this is for you." Adella opened the envelope. Inside was a contract on thick, watermarked paper. The logo at the top read Lumiere Global. Position: Director of Cultural Acquisition and International Relations. Base salary: $185,000. Signing bonus: $40,000. Adella read the numbers twice. The sounds of the restaurant faded into a dull roar. The numbers didn't just represent money, they represented her father. "I visited the facility this morning," Adella said, her voice thick with emotion. "Because of the advance you gave me. They moved Dad to the memory care wing. He has a window now, Pierre. He can see the garden. When I walked in, he was sitting in the sun. He didn't know my name, but he looked peaceful. For the first time in 2 years, he looked peaceful." Tears pricked the corners of her eyes. She hastily wiped them away, afraid to ruin the moment. "You saved him," she whispered. "No," Pierre said firmly, leaning forward. "You saved yourself. I simply provided the vehicle. You provided the fuel. You possess a rare gift, Adella. You see the world not just for what it costs, but for what it means. Callaway knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. You are the opposite." The wine arrived. This time the service was flawless. The dark, ruby liquid swirled in the large crystal goblets. "To reading the menu," Pierre toasted. "To reading between the lines," Adella corrected, clinking her glass against his. They drank. The wine was spectacular. Notes of dark berries, leather, and smoked meat. It tasted like victory. Midway through the main course, a sea bass that Adella had served 1,000 times but never tasted, she noticed a commotion at table 4. A young waitress, new to the staff, was struggling. She looked to be about 20, her uniform slightly too big, her hair frizzing under the humidity of the kitchen. She was serving a table of 4 businessmen who were clearly half drunk and impatient. "I said sparkling water, sweetheart," one of the men snapped, loud enough for Adella to hear. "This is still. Can you not read the bottle?" The girl froze. The blood drained from her face. Her hand shook, and a few drops of water spilled onto the tablecloth. "Oh, for God's sake," the man groaned, throwing his napkin down. "Now the table is wet. Get the manager." The girl looked like she was about to shatter. She looked around, eyes wide, terrified, looking for an escape hatch that didn't exist. Adella stopped eating. She saw herself. She saw the fear, the exhaustion, the feeling of being small in a room full of giants. "Excuse me for a moment," Adella said to Pierre. Pierre watched her, a small smile playing on his lips. "Take your time." Adella stood up. She smoothed her suit jacket. She walked across the dining room floor, her heels clicking with a rhythm of authority. She approached table 4. The businessman was still berating the girl. "I want Henri over here," the man was saying. "This service is a joke." "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" Adella asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it projected perfectly. It commanded the space. The businessman looked up, annoyed, expecting a manager. Instead, he saw a woman who looked like she owned the building. "Yeah, there's a problem," the man grunted, though he sat up straighter. "This girl can't pour water." Adella looked at the table. She looked at the tiny wet spot on the cloth, no bigger than a dime. "It appears to be condensation," Adella said coldly. "And regarding the water, the bottle on your table is San Pellegrino, which is sparkling. Perhaps the carbonation had settled. A common occurrence." She turned her gaze to the waitress. The girl was trembling, holding a tray against her chest like a shield. "What is your name?" Adella asked softly. Maya," the girl stammered. "Maya," Adella said. "Go to the bar. Ask for a bottle of the reserve champagne. Bring it here." "But the manager," Maya whispered. "I will handle the manager," Adella said. "Go!" Maya scrambled away. Adella turned back to the businessmen. "The champagne is on the house. I suggest you enjoy it. And I suggest that when the young lady returns, you treat her with the respect due to the person handling your food. Unless, of course, you want the rest of your meal to be served by the dishwasher." The men stared at her. They nodded, cowed by her absolute confidence. Adella walked to the service station where she knew the servers kept their personal items. She took a pen from her purse. She grabbed a linen napkin, a violation of rules she used to fear. She wrote quickly. She wrapped the napkin around a crisp $100 bill she had in her pocket, the first bill from her new salary. When Maya returned with the champagne, looking terrified but determined, Adella intercepted her near the kitchen doors. "You handled that well," Adella lied to give her strength. "I thought I was going to faint," Maya admitted, her eyes wet. "I'm not good at this. I'm trying to pay for nursing school." Adella smiled. "Nursing school. That's a noble goal." She pressed the napkin into Maya's hand. "This is for you, not for the house pool. For you." Maya looked at the money, her eyes widening. I can't take this. You didn't even sit in my section." "I sat in your section for 3 years, Adella said. She leaned in close, her voice fierce and kind. "Listen to me, Maya. They will try to make you feel small. They will snap their fingers and roll their eyes. But you are not the uniform. You are the person inside it. You are smarter than they are because you have to be. Never let them see you cry. And never ever let them make you forget who you really are." Maya clutched the napkin. "Who are you?" "I'm just a customer," Adella said. "Now go pour that champagne, and don't spill a drop." Adella turned and walked back to table 1. She sat down across from Pierre, who was beaming. "That was very dramatic," Pierre noted. "I learned from the best," Adella replied. "Ready to go?" Pierre asked. "We have an early flight to Paris tomorrow. The merger documents await." "I'm ready," Adella said. They stood up. Henri rushed over to open the door for them, bowing low. "Good night, Miss Bennet. Mr. Dubois. It was an honor." "Good night, Henry," Adella said. She walked out through the heavy oak doors, stepping into the cool New York night. She took a deep breath. The city lights were dazzling, a million stars brought down to earth. She looked back through the window of Le Petit Palais one last time. She saw Maya at table 4, pouring champagne with a steady hand, her head held high. Maya looked toward the window, caught Adella's eye, and gave a small, brave smile. Adella smiled back, turned her collar up against the wind, and walked toward the waiting Rolls-Royce. She wasn't running away anymore. She was just getting started. Harrison Callaway thought he could crush Adella because she was just a waitress. He judged her by her apron, not her mind. He didn't realize that the person serving his food was smarter, tougher, and more capable than he would ever be. Adella didn't just win a job. She won her dignity back. It's a reminder to all of us. Treat everyone with respect, because you never know who is really holding the power. If you loved this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. What would you have done in Adella's shoes? Let me know in the comments below.